Hello everyone and welcome back to the new news. My name is Paul and I'm going to be your host for the day. I hope everyone is safe. I hope everyone's family is safe, your friends are safe, and I hope that you've had a great first day to your weekend. Unfortunately, the weekend always seems to go too fast for me, and I'm sure it does for you as well. But nonetheless, we still got tomorrow. And today we have quite a few things going on in the news worldwide. Some pretty interesting developments in the Islamic State front, in Ukraine, of course, especially today with different European leaders going and visiting the country. And if you're looking to support Ukraine, we do have in the description of this video a bunch of different links. Once we're big enough to become monetized, we'll actually just have fundraisers in every single stream, and you'll be able to donate towards that cause. We're going to focus it, obviously, currently it's going to be Ukraine, but as other things pop off around the world, food insecurity in places such as Ethiopia and Somalia, or malaria outbreaks in Southeast Asia, or what have you, we'll be having fundraisers for that as well, so we can be a continual force for good. And so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive right in to the news that we have going on. And the first thing that we have is actually the clearing of UXO, or unexploded ordnance, just northwest of Kyiv continues. There's the Ukrainian military or defense military or ministry actually posted today of a video of their guys actually going through and clearing this stuff out. There's an unbelievable amount of unexploded ordnance all over Ukraine. It's very hazardous to anyone that goes around it, especially to the civilian population. And so they have to go through it and find each and every little unexploded mortar and mine and bomb, and they have to go through and actually deactivate all of those, detonate some of them. They said, don't worry, you're going to hear some explosions around the Kyiv area and the outskirts. Don't worry, it's just our guys clearing that stuff up. And here's the video. So as you can see, there's a lot of unexploded ordnance going on in the area. And they're going to have to go through and that's going to be a painstaking process. Actually, here in France, there are parts of the Ardennes and areas around Verdun where the civilians still aren't allowed there because of ordnance left over from World War I over 100 years ago. It is still that littered, and I'm sure there may be areas now in Ukraine that are similar to that, and much like you have the Chernobyl exclusion zone, just because it's so highly radioactive, and we've heard all sorts of fun things about the Russians up there, but I'm sure there's going to be parts of Ukraine now that are just going to be so littered that you can't go there, and it's going to take years and years and years. And unfortunately, people are going to find out the unfortunate way of unexploded ordnance for years to come throughout the country, as some ordnance just remains in the middle of fields and cities and buried in the mud that are still alive and able to go off at any time. However, we have some interesting developments in Kyiv today. The first one we have here is actually that the Austrian Chancellor visited Kyiv today. Politicians from across the globe, especially in Europe, have come now that Russian forces are no longer threatening the northern region of Ukraine. It is now relatively safe enough to come to Ukraine, to the capital, and speak with Zelensky personally. We've seen the Slovakian Prime Minister came down and looked at the mass graves and everything personally in Bucha, and also met with President Zelensky. Today, we can see that same thing today from the Austrian Chancellor. He met with different representatives of the government and also later spoke with President Zelensky himself.
Das war eine sogenannte Schilder für Kiew. Wenn wir machen keine richtige Kampf da, dann würden wir in die Stadt. Aber das war kritische Wochen.
Sehr wichtig für den Besuch. Das ist ein Symbol, das ist sehr wichtig. Auch sehr viele Presse berichtet und erzählt Wahrheit, was in Ukraine passiert. Sehr geehrte Kanzler, danke für Ihr Engagement und danke für Ihren Besuch in Kiew. Das ist sehr wichtig, ein symbolischer Besuch und wir schätzen das sehr.
However, he's not the only leader to meet with Zelensky today. Topping even that was today, the UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson actually made a surprise visit to Ukraine today, or what seems to have been a surprise visit. They met and talked about further aid from the UK to Ukraine, and as well, they also went for a walk around the city of Kyiv and actually met some of the citizens while out and about today. There's a picture of them meeting in the capital. And we actually have a video of them walking around and talking with some of the citizens that have gone through all of this, and while they're out just walking and talking throughout the streets of Kyiv. So let's take a look.
This guy, he's got what is this?
Привіт.
Remont is a watch.
Yes, remote is to, remote the watch, yes. Yes.
Я такий радий, Борис, forever Great Britain. Це капець, який я радий. Скажи, що ми вдячні будемо до кінця свого життя.
He said, Boris, that thank you.
Дякую.
Нажмі, дивіться. Борис. Я радий, я такий радий вас бачити. Я люблю Британію. Вона врятувала нас. І мої діти, мої внуки будемо про це пам'ятати. Це буде жити крізь століття, ці спогади. Ви нам дуже потрібні. Всі це знають.
It's nice to meet you, and it's been our privilege to help you have a remarkable president, Mr. Zelensky, who's done an outstanding job, and we simply wish to keep supporting the people of Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Дякую, Борис. Я ніколи в житті не мріяв вас зустріти. Це найкраща зустріч в моєму житті.
Добрый день.
Open the cars, can you move? Yes, yeah,
I think he was.
So it is a pretty lengthy video, but it's pretty interesting that many world leaders at this point have come and actually visited Ukraine and met with President Zelensky personally. Now the country still is it's not necessarily perfectly safe in these areas. I mean, where there's still plenty of stuff going on. There are parts of the country that are still occupied. There's still heavy ongoing fighting, and we'll get to some of that later in a lot of these areas. And at any point in time, this situation, Russia still has an insane amount of troops and equipment just across the border in Belarus in places like Amel and Mazir, and places like Belgorod and Bryansk that they could bring to bear at any point in time on the north again. I mean, the area is not out of the woods yet, but it's still pretty impressive to see that many world leaders that feel safe enough, or at least willing to put safety aside and still come and meet personally with Zelensky and take a look at really what's happened in the country with their own eyes. And that's not the only thing today. President Zelensky also gave an address in English to the world today about day 45, and he's calling for more sanctions and international support. So we're going to go ahead and give that a watch, and because it's not very often that he gives speeches or addresses in English. And I know a lot of us in the audience are English or are native English speakers, or at least are fluent in English, but not necessarily Ukrainian. So I figured it would be interesting for us to take a listen to, because it's a little bit different. We don't have a translator here. So let's go ahead and give this a watch.
"45 days of a full-scale war and defense against Russia's attack. The attack by the largest country in the world, the largest by its territory, the largest by its aggressiveness, the largest by its impunity. Russian leadership failed to account for one fact, the fact that it attacks the other largest country in the world, Ukraine, the largest by its courage. We're not afraid of massive missile strikes, Russian aircrafts, and never-ending tank columns. Ukrainian courage has inflicted heavy losses on the Russian army, which has already lost more of its soldiers than during the previous decades of regular wars. Ukrainian courage has already united the whole democratic world. Millions of people in different countries are witnessing our courage. The people from different countries know about our bravery. It shall always be remembered in history. But I would like Ukrainian courage to be shared by everyone in the world, just as we are defending ourselves against the greatest tyranny of all. So the other people of the world should bravely resist this tyranny. They have to do everything to force Russia to seek peace. They have to do everything to hold Russian soldiers and their commanders accountable for their crimes against the Ukrainian people. Sanctions must be imposed against all Russian banks. Russian oil embargo must be imposed. The Russian war crimes machine should be denied its capacity to act. Vital assistance should be provided to Ukraine. We have asked for weapons. We've asked for financial assistance. We have asked for support to Ukrainian migrants, for those 10 million people forced by Russian to flee their homes. The democratic world had the power to help. Ukrainian courage deserves respect. Convince your politicians. Stay with Ukraine. Stay with freedom. Stay with bravery.
Very powerful. You can understand why he has made that address. A lot of the statements he makes, English. He's originally speaks Russian. He also speaks Ukrainian now fluently, of course, as the president of the nation of Ukraine. But Russian is actually his first language. Many people don't know that. For being called a Nazi so much in a Nazi regime that he has, he's actually Jewish. But English is very difficult for him. We've seen that from other interviews, and when he was talking with Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and so he doesn't give these kind of speeches very often. But when he does, there's a very big reason behind it, and his country's been rattled by war for 45 days now. Ukraine originally wasn't expected to last more than a couple days. Obviously, they did. And obviously, what we thought a Russian military was capable of, we overestimated them. But no less, though, has it taken a major toll on the country, on the military forces of Ukraine, on the average citizens. And so while it seems like he is just being a dead horse, because you've seen countries over and over and over again sending that aid, sending what they, putting on heavier and heavier sanctions, the heaviest sanctions ever imposed in history, might I add. He still calls for more, understandably so, and I think it's because the need for help never stops until it's over. And even when it's over, the country is still going to have to rebuild. And most of these cities and villages have been, for all intents and purposes, wiped off the map. And so there's going to have to be a massive effort even after this to just rebuild the nation. And that will take even more help. And I'm sure we'll receive calls for help again for that, and until the war ends. And on a little bit of happier note, the Borodyanka survivor cat, which became a very internet celebrity, it seems, overnight, one of the few things that actually survived Borodyanka, which is actually expected to be worse than Bucha and Irpin and Hostomel in terms of casualties, civilian casualties, got a new home today. We have some pictures. It now lives, there it is, in Borodyanka, mangy and very upset, and there it is now. It got cleaned up, it got washed, it got fed, it's been given lots and lots of love, and now it currently lives in the Ministry of Internal Affairs in Ukraine. So all of the workplace employees now help and take care of this cat. It's their little mascot now. And isn't it just adorable? You got some of the process here of them cleaning it up and taking care of it. So, some good news. We've also seen, I wasn't able to pinpoint it, but we've also seen some more pictures of Cartridge, the little bomb-sniffing dog that we had a video on a couple days ago. I saw him on top of an entire pile of artillery shells that he found. So, it's so the animals in Ukraine, where there's a lot of videos and pictures of Ukrainian troops with dogs and cats and stuff that had to be left behind when the civilians had to flee, and they're all adorable. We can't show them all the time here. A lot of them you can't tell where they're at, but at least we know that the survivor cat from Borodyanka now has a nice home, and he or she's getting all the love and affection they could ever want. But as we move into more serious news, however, of course, nothing more has come out of Chernihiv or Sumy. We did see some stuff in Chernihiv today. I should digress and take a note there. We did have some information coming out of Chernihiv. It wasn't very solid yet, or I couldn't independently verify this from different sources. However, there was at least a church within the region that they did find. Not only had it been used as an artillery position by Russian forces, but they found some civilian bodies, from my understanding, at that church. However, we weren't able to confirm that or have any explicit certainty on that, so it did not appear in the stream today. If we can confirm that, it will likely be in tomorrow's stream. But moving on, in Kharkiv, we have a lot of developments. The shelling of Kharkiv continues. So Kharkiv is one of the cities along this kind of eastern front that they're going for. They were going for the Donbass, but Kharkiv kind of falls within that realm, as well as in the south. But the shelling continues, and we actually have a pretty surprising footage, I should say, but it's not very surprising in this day and age, of Russian forces shelling the city of Kharkiv with more munitions. So purportedly, the explosion in this made a crater that was 5 meters deep. But there are very obviously civilians just walking around the street, going about their daily lives. This is right next to an apartment complex. So let's go ahead and take a look. I mean, civilians just going about their daily... This guy's putting trash away. He's throwing trash out in a dumpster. Like, these people were just kind of walking out of their apartment buildings. And then all of a sudden, they're getting shelled. We know a shell hit this building. In fact, to an extent, we're fairly sure that this is actually the same apartment building. This is something that we found before the video. But we're pretty sure that this is a shell that hit this very same apartment building. As you can see, the crater there. Completely destroyed it. Several people had to be evacuated from the apartment. But it's completely destroyed. Yet another piece of infrastructure lost in Kharkiv. Kharkiv has been under pretty much continual fighting and shelling since the beginning of the war. Russian forces pushed all the way to Kharkiv. They almost encircled it, were pushed back, but they've been just outside the city since. But that's not the only development in Kharkiv. In a similar vein to the thermobaric munitions that were used in Syria, that were 500 kilogram bombs, we've also seen parachute bombs, quote unquote, being dropped in Kharkiv today. And there's a photo of it. Where I'm not quite sure what kind of munition this is. I tried looking it up and tried finding what kind of munition is being used here. It is not the thermobaric warheads that are also dropped via parachute, like we saw in Syria and in Aleppo. But if we can't find out, we will identify. But that is a new kind of munition being used in the city of Kharkiv, at least today. And once again, in Rubizne, another 4-ton tank of nitric acid was hit. We reported on one being hit several days ago. Again today, Russian forces hit it. However, as you see, unlike last time, this is not red. It is yellow, meaning it is good for Ukraine. The reason being is because after they hit it, the toxic cloud of nitric acid the wind shifted, and it sent that nitric acid onto Russian positions outside of a couple towns on the other side of the front lines. So the Russians gassed themselves. That's all they did. They just gassed themselves. And this affects your upper respiratory system and can eventually kill you. But we actually have some footage today of that. And you see that heavy orange toxic smoke billowing out. So, originally was going to be bad for Ukraine. However, it just kind of, literally blew up in the Russians' face there, and they just gassed themselves. And I have yet to see any Russian forces carry anything like a gas mask or anything with them this entire war. So I'm sure they were not protected against that. And as we move down towards Donetsk, we have a lot of developments today. Yesterday, there was a ballistic missile strike that hit the railroad station in Kramatorsk. It killed 52 people that we know of, wounded another 109, I believe. And so today we have even more in a similar vein. There's been a lot of ballistic missile strikes and a lot of ballistic missile launches. These aren't like full-scale ICBMs or intercontinental ballistic missiles. These are what are called TBMs, or theater ballistic missiles. Things that are kind of medium to short-range ballistic missiles, very large pieces of ordnance, and very large missiles indeed, but they can be launched mostly from vehicle platforms and stuff like that. They're not going all the way almost to space and then coming back down, several thousand kilometers and from where they were launched and hitting something with a nuclear warhead. These things are just launching standard munitions, just a larger package of them. We can see these ballistic missiles being fired here in Shakhtarsk, which is actually what we believe, based on the video evidence yesterday, is the actual firing point of the Toshka U missiles that were fired at Kramatorsk. The same battery is likely firing again today.
А там что они пропадают?
And these are not BM-21s. That is an angle of attack that BM-21s do not really have. BM-21s have a much more shallow angle of fire, generally speaking. They also launch munitions much faster. They have a faster rate of fire. These are ballistic missile launches. Similar thing here near Kharkiv. We also have more footage of more launches. We can see over here at Makivka, just outside of Donetsk, where these missiles were actually flying overhead. And we can also see some launches off in the distance across the front lines. These is probably the same launches. And finally, to kind of finish this off, Donetsk itself appears to have been hit by at least one of these, as we can see here. A pretty massive explosion there in Donetsk, the city itself. But that's not the only thing going on here in the Donetsk, though there has been a large amount, and we'll actually cover some more, but there has been a large amount of ballistic missile launches. They're also still using helicopters and jets, and they're still conducting standard artillery pieces, 2S1s, 2S3s, BM-21s, which is the Katyusha launchers. That hasn't changed since World War II, it appears. But we see here K-52 alligators.
Я не успел Я не успел
So we know that there's still that this entire area is just ramping up militarily. There's been a lot of activity here. We know this is where Russia is shifting its front to. We know that they're up here near Popasna. There was a bunch of Wagner group guys that got killed, which is a mercenary group. They're called the Wagner group. You'll probably see it spelled Wagner. That W is just pronounced as a V, but for our English speakers anyway. But up near Popasna, we saw what looked to be white phosphorus being used against Ukrainian forces. We've seen trenches. Wagner group were in trenches. They got pretty much wiped out here. We know that about 6 different attacks were repelled somewhere here in the Donetsk region. We've seen high amounts of artillery, rotor wing air, and fixed wing airstrikes. We've seen ballistic missile strikes. We've seen artillery, heavy artillery usage, mortar fire. And this whole area is still filled with landmines and trenches from the years and years of fighting between separatists and Ukrainian troops along this front already. And now that's just going to intensify, and it's going to be a very, very bloody, and I think drawn out conflict here as this whole ordeal shifts. And as we go down to Mariupol, we start with some good news for Ukraine here, and that is that the Azov Battalion scored a direct hit with a mortar round on Russian forces. All it took was one very impressive shooting, and they knocked out what appears to be a couple Russian vehicles. There was some other footage, aerial footage, of what was supposedly these vehicles, though personally I did not see anything that correlated between the two, and so I omitted it, but we do have the video. In case you're wondering why you don't smoke near explosives, it's not necessarily because they'll always explode. Like, you can burn C4, it just burns really fast and really hot like that does. So, it's not about the explosion, it's about the fire. So, remember kids, don't smoke next to your C4. In Mariupol today, citizens did take some video recordings of this city and release them to what is called the Mariupol Now Telegram. And we got to see some of that footage today. Mariupol, for all intents and purposes, has been wiped off of the map, much like other villages and cities. The last report we got was several weeks ago, and it stated that 90% of the city had been destroyed. We received a report from the mayor of the city that roughly 5,000 citizens have been killed. That estimates between 5,000 and 10,000 currently citizens have been killed. There's reports of mobile crematoriums being moved into the city by Russian forces to try and hide evidence of the war crimes. And today we can see that the city is just, it's gonna, whatever's left standing will have to be demolished. I don't believe that there's any infrastructure left in the city at this point that could be saved. You might as well have dropped an atomic bomb on the city, because everything that's left standing is going to have to get demolished and rebuilt anyway. So let's go ahead and take a look. People have made a lot of comparisons between Mariupol and Stalingrad, just because of how the city looks. I think we could say that it looked like Stalingrad a week ago, but now it looks more like Hiroshima or Nagasaki. I mean, if it's still standing, it's barely doing so. It's got one pillar in the center holding whatever's left up. And the rest has been flattened or destroyed. Like I said, you might as well have dropped an atomic bomb on the city, because it would look probably about the same. So, a week ago, yeah, I'd say, yeah, you're right. It does look like Stalingrad. Now it just looks like Hiroshima after the atomic bomb. At this point, the shelling still continues. There, we've seen RT, which is a Russian news network, even post promotional videos of them shelling the city. So, take that for what it is. But yeah, it's Mariupol's bad, but it still holds. We haven't heard of any shifts in the front lines in Mariupol yet. In Melitopol, however, as a result of the massive gains made by Ukrainian forces near Kherson as they drive from Mykolaiv towards Kherson, and this whole region here, Melitopol has seen a large influx of Russian activity, meaning Melitopol has been under occupation for a while now, but there's been a lot of recordings of different Russian convoys going through the city. We also saw them stealing tractors and taking them to Crimea yesterday. Today we see even more Russian equipment getting moved through the city. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So, as you can see here, the Ukrainian forces are probably going to see a large influx of Russian forces into the Kherson area. I don't know if you could tell, but there was a tractor that they have apparently commandeered and taken to the front lines. I have no idea what they're going to use that for, but they've run out of trucks and Scooby-Doo vans and everything else now, and they are now stealing tractors. So, who knows? Maybe they'll weld some armor plating onto it. I'm surprised that we've seen them even use technicals at this point, where they took some Toyota Hilux from the 90s and put a Dishko on the back of it, just like some ISIS terrorist would. And so it really doesn't surprise me. But for inside the country of Ukraine, that's really it. I know you're probably wondering where the name of this video came from. And that's because we're going to go ahead and move on to the international news, because in Russia, we have some more developments that are based in Ukraine and are going to be very important to Ukraine. And so we're going to go ahead and cover those before I really get into the true international part of this news. But the first thing I want to take a look at is more TBMs we're seeing flying over Belgorod today. That means they're also launching them from Russia itself. Not surprising. It just adds on to this whole ballistic missile thing that we're seeing. And we'll get to the reason for that in a bit. But up in Bryansk, where they had previously moved a large amount of their rotary and fixed-wing aircraft, they moved it from Belarus over to an airfield near Bryansk. Today we see even more Russian equipment in that area. But when we get to Moscow here, this man's name is so I'm just going to pull him up. This is General Alexander Darnikov. He was in charge of Russian forces in Syria. And this man's nickname is the Butcher of Syria. In 2016 through clear up until now, actually we'll get to that in a little bit, he was in charge of the southern forces of Russia. When he came into basically his position, he completely changed how the Russians were operating inside the country. By 2017, it only took him a couple of months. I think in less than 6 months of him taking control, by mid-2017, over 5,000 civilians had been killed in Syria due to his airstrikes. One of the things that he authorized was the use of thermobaric weapons, those parachute bombs that we were talking about earlier, and it is believed that his first act of taking control of the Russian military forces in Ukraine was actually the missile strike that hit Kramatorsk and killed all of those civilians. He is known for his brutality. He is the one that ordered the leveling of Aleppo in Syria. He is the one that basically leveled every single village outside of Damascus, the nation capital of Syria. He basically had the Russian military level every bit of that. And then after that, they rolled through it with their tanks and essentially wiped out any survivors. The reason that he is probably the reason why al-Assad is still even alive is because he used his forces and was so brutal in his campaigns that he completely turned the tide against the rebel forces. And it wasn't until U.S. intervention put us in the country and we created that deconfliction line of the middle Euphrates River Valley that Russia wouldn't have stopped. In fact, they didn't stop. It's supposedly the Wagner's forces that attacked U.S. forces in Syria in 2018 were ordered to do so by this man. And this is also the first time that Russia has yet to put an individual military commander in charge of Ukraine. At this point, it was individual generals, lesser ranked generals. They call them colonel generals, I believe, in the Russian military. But it was lesser generals that were each in charge of their own axis of advance. And the Kremlin was calling the shots. The political entity of the Kremlin was calling that central core shot, Putin himself. And it is believed that that is one of the reasons for their failure on a military command and control level. This guy's going to change that, more than likely. Syria was very similar with how it was operating until he was put in command of this. He also has experience. He was near the Donbass region. He was, before he took over Syria, and the forces there in the Southern Command. He was in charge of forces in and around Georgia. So any mistakes he's made before, he's probably learned from them. He's not a dumb individual by any means. In my personal experiences, that is the Russian general that we had to worry about, and who we knew was who we were dealing with when it came to the Russians in Syria, when I was there. And so I'm sure some things are going to change with how the Russians are operating in the country. They are probably going to be a bit more effective, and we're pretty sure all of these ballistic missile strikes, this real terror operation that he's conducting, is part of his plan for the region. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the rest of the international news that kind of covers everything we have going on in the country of Ukraine thus far and around Ukraine. And we're going to go ahead and move down into the Middle East here. The first thing we have is that Israel actually used its Iron Dome defense system to intercept rockets that were fired from Tel Aviv militants up in southern Lebanon. And so we do not know anything other than that, but we do have some photos here. It looks like a video.
اسمع صوت قوي هودي شكلهم في شي ضربة قوية.
And then we also have a couple of developments here about the same thing. So there was a gunman, I believe 2 days ago in Tel Aviv, that opened fire. He killed 3 people and wounded another 14. His name was Rahad Azim. They did end up, I believe, killing him. And they are in the Israeli police and the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, went and they attempted to arrest his family. They got some of them. Others, however, it purportedly failed because several relatives escaped. This comes at the same time as the Palestinian Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade actually claimed responsibility for the attack. It seems that Rahad Azim was actually part of that Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which is a Palestinian movement probably in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip that is against Israeli control. It's one of several groups, but let's take a look here. You can see there's a picture, and then we have a video here of the operation regarding his family's arrest. Should be noted that there are some very significant rising tensions in Israel between the Palestinian occupants of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and the Israelis. There's been tensions for years. However, those tensions continue to rise. There was recently a multilateral basically meeting between both Israel, the Palestinians, and multiple Arab countries regarding their political and security endeavors within the region, trying to stabilize that region. However, a series of different terror attacks has really underscored that. We've seen raids by the IDF in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip that led to several Palestinians being killed and has really flared those tensions. We can see that that continues today. However, as well today and apparently this night, we see that there was another terror attack, a shooting in Rahat. 9 people were injured as gunmen opened fire at a cafe there. At least 4 were arrested in relation to the shooting by the Israeli police. However, we don't know how that they are involved. That information has not been released, but we do have some videos of the incident. Now, we don't know who is going, just like everything, it's not known who is behind the attack. We don't know if it's a Palestinian group. We don't know if it's Tel Aviv fighters from Lebanon who also fired rockets. We also don't know if it's the Islamic State. It could be any of them. It could be any terror organization. There's plenty of them out there. But Israel has been a hotbed for terror activity lately. There's been a lot of attacks. Israel is pretty much hated by everybody in this region. So it could be any number of groups, whether government-backed, individual, jihadists, extremists. Who knows? So, and it seems that the Russians have decided to find a way to unleash a little bit of their frustration since they seem unable to make any gains in Ukraine. They went back to doing what they do best, and that's bombing third world countries. The Russian Air Force conducted airstrikes in the northern Syrian city of Idlib today. We don't know of the casualties thus far, but we do know it's happening, as you can see there. So, they apparently are still operating in Syria. Most of their military forces are dedicated to Ukraine right now, including a large majority of their ground forces. They actually had pulled Syrian fighters from al-Assad's regime, Bashar al-Assad. But we don't know how much it's working. There's also Turkish forces up here, Turkish-backed forces up here. There's like 40 different groups inside of Syria that they could be targeting right now. But we also know that they have no problem flattening entire cities like Aleppo. We've seen it happen to Palmyra, to Homs, Hama. Deir ez-Zor was part of that. Kasham, Al-Tapka. We've seen them level all over the place. We've seen them level entire cities in this country, and they seem to wanted to show that they are still able to do something. If it's not in Ukraine, at least they want to still show they have a presence in Syria. Nothing out of Iraq or Iran today. However, in Afghanistan, there have been some interesting developments. In the north, up in Kunduz province, we saw that Islamic State fighters destroyed a power line. This is very important because Afghanistan does not have a lot of energy production itself, so they rely a lot on imports, on energy imports, mainly electricity. And this specific power line runs out of Tajikistan and supports a lot of the northern part of the country. It's part of that main import line. And so we have a photo here. They destroyed it. They blew it up. However, we also know that Islamic State fighters were also targeting people, or were targeting the Taliban inside of the state of the nation's capital today. At least 2 Taliban trucks were attacked in separate attacks today, killing or wounding a total of 8 Taliban fighters. And we have a couple of photos on that too. They used IEDs to detonate either near or on or under these vehicles, and of course they used them with catastrophic results. IEDs are very common in Afghanistan. There's to give you an idea of the IED problem in Afghanistan, there are so many IEDs from the war, or the wars that have occurred in Afghanistan, whether you're talking about the Soviet invasion, or you're talking about the Taliban takeover, or you're talking about the 20 years that the coalition was there, or you're talking about the resistance movement that's up here in the north, that some of these IEDs have been planted for so long and have sat untouched that most of them don't work anymore. And it's so much work to clear them that Afghanistan actually just paves roads over top of them. They just pave right over them. There's so many of them. They don't bother clearing them because most of them don't work anyway now. They're so old and sitting there so long, so they just literally pave new roads over top of them, and every once in a while one goes off, and they just fill the hole. And in Islamabad today, we've talked about the Prime Minister of Pakistan for a while. We knew that there was a vote of no confidence. We've seen anti-American rallies. We've seen all sorts of things because of this. Even he's told the president that the president should dissolve the parliament of Pakistan. However, he no longer has his office now. The Pakistan parliament swiftly voted him out of office as a vote of no confidence took place. That has led to some interesting repercussions. This comes after the prime minister stated that the parliament needed to be dissolved because it had been tainted through America, or through specifically the United States, but foreign intervention, meaning that it was other countries backing these politicians and kind of pulling the strings behind closed doors, so to say, and the Americans were truly who were trying to get rid of him, but they voted him out anyway. Who cares? So now there's a lot of stuff going on inside the country. There's some unrest. His talks on American intervention in the domestic policies of Pakistan resonated with a lot of Pakistanis, considering there was a 20-year-long war right across the border. There was a raid up here in northern Pakistan, I believe, actually in Abbottabad, where they killed bin Laden. Bin Laden was in Pakistan when we killed him. And so it's really resonated with a lot of individuals, and they do not necessarily agree. There's some unrest about the fact that he's no longer the prime minister. A little bit more Ukrainian focus is actually coming out of Kazakhstan today. And this happens as a pro-Ukrainian rally was broken up, and the protesters, the anti-war protesters there, were actually arrested by police in the country. Kazakhstan is actually much like Belarus, they are a supporter of Russia. They're vocally supporting Russia in this whole endeavor, however you wish to take that. But we actually have video today of them actually breaking up this protest and arresting those protesters. Now, I don't know about you, but that looks a lot like old Soviet stuff to me. And it very much reminds me of what's going on in St. Petersburg and in Moscow at any anti-war rallies going on. And as we move over here into Asia, Shanghai, which is China's second largest city, I believe it's sitting at 27 million people. But Shanghai has been in a severe lockdown for the last 10 days, and we actually have a video here of individuals shouting for help because this lockdown went into effect immediately, and no one had time to go and even get food. So people are starting to run low on food now after 10 days, and they're starting to scream help from their apartment windows.
这个是正常人的叫，好了，终于200人，所有人都在叫，要命了！就刚刚5分钟前头，俺叫了没几个了，现在突然之间，所有人都叫了，要死！要命了！再这样弄下去，我跟侬讲，真的要出事体了。
Rather self-explanatory there of what's going on in Shanghai. They have been testing the whole entire all the citizens of Shanghai for 3 continuous days. They brought this lockdown on after they announced that 21,000 people had been diagnosed with the COVID-19 pandemic, and China quickly decided they wanted to snuff that out, even if it meant that some of their people starved to death in the country or in the mega city of Shanghai. So, only a couple of developments in Africa today. The first one we don't have any video of per se, but there was a terror attack that killed 6 and injured another 3 in Goma, which is inside of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There were several service members and civilians involved. This happened after a terrorist set off an IED inside of a bar in the city of Goma. No one has claimed responsibility for the attacks at this point. Up here in Mali today, Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists were actually killed near Nara. The jihadists of the Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin group, which is Al-Qaeda affiliated, were actually killed after a raid by military forces in the area. This specific cell is suspected of having conducted multiple terror attacks in the country and led to the deaths of dozens of civilians. And finally, inside of the United States today, coming out of Cape Canaveral, Florida, Exium Space, which is a private space company, actually sent the first all-private crew to the International Space Station. They arrived today. This is going to be a week-long project where they have multilateral science exchanges and different things that they're going to do aboard the International Space Station. This comes as the company plans on having a low Earth orbit, or a LEO, space station of their own coming within the next few years, and it's considered a huge achievement in the commercial space industry. At the same time, there's also some issues with SpaceX currently in Texas, where they have their permit was basically denied with the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the expansion to their space center in Texas. So interesting to see these two rival companies competing, and SpaceX, which has really been the forerunner for all this stuff, seeming to running into issues, while this company is already planning on having their own space station with the upcoming few years. So cool media. A lot of mainstream media had stuff put out about it. They had videos. We weren't able to find any independent videos for obvious reasons on this whole thing. So, however, I'm sure if you would like, go check it out. It's really cool. There's been a lot of talk in the space industry, especially the commercial space industry, on astro mining and putting things into orbit to make it easier and cheaper to get rockets into space. There's currently a company testing right now if they can even launch, if they can spin a rocket pod around fast enough to actually, it becomes so fast it has escape velocity, and then they launch it just using like this pendulum system, which is really cool. You should go check it out. There's an entire company dedicated to this, and it's really cool. It's worked so far with models, and they're currently working on the permits and the plans to build a full-scale one and test it. But there's a lot of companies right now that are looking to really see what we can do outside of our planet and commercialize it and make it cheaper to actually get into space, to recover things from space, to do astro mining. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of cool developments in the months and years, and I'm sure the next couple decades going forward in space technology and the ability to go into space. At this point, who knows, maybe we'll even make it into space and be able to do a broadcast if we keep this up long enough. So we'll see how that goes. But when it comes to the news, that is it for today. I appreciate everyone joining us once again. If you could go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed this, it really helps us out. And it also makes it so we're another step closer with each person that subscribes to becoming monetized. That doesn't mean money for us, however, because we're going to use that instead to put fundraisers on every single stream that we do. We're never going to be you're never going to see super chats or anything that comes to us. We're an all volunteer team, and we're going to be we put fundraisers on every single stream we're going to be doing. And that includes right now, and if you go check out the description below, there's a bunch of organizations regarding humanitarian and military support for Ukraine. So if you either want to support the war effort, or if you want to support the humanitarian efforts in the country as they fight for their international integrity and being able to kick Russia out of their country, you can go ahead and support that below. And also, if you want to help the people that are the innocent people that have been devastated by this war and have either fled the country or are still unfortunately unable to flee and are stuck inside of there, there's places you can donate to below that. We've vetted them all to make sure that your money actually gets to where it needs to go and actually goes to help people. Other than that, we do this stream every single day at 10 p.m. I have to thank the staff. The volunteer staff team here does an amazing job. They are the reasons that we're able to do this, because without them, I could not do this on my own. So make sure you give your support to the staff as well. And if you want to join the community, we have a lot of stuff coming in all day long that gets posted inside of like the Ukraine media channel. There, go ahead in the description. There's a Discord link you can go to. Check out that Discord. Come join us over there. We get on and chat sometimes with you, talk about different things. You can have discussions. There's areas for all different regions of the world. And so go ahead and go check that out and join our community. And you'll also get updated when we're getting ready to go live, so you can be here to watch from the beginning every single day. And other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. See ya.